are keynotes, we have a time for questions, but today I will take another chance for questions. I decided to invite to this place this extraordinary man, Richard Estes, so all of you can listen to him and know him. Only a few words. Professor Richard Estes is Professor of Social Work and Social Policy at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And he has a Master of Social Work and a Doctorate of Social Work. He visited so many countries that I need a day to tell you all the countries where Richard make visit and also work in these countries. He was a founder of International Society of Quality of Life Studies, a president of our association. He received a lot of awards, but when I will tell you, he received the Distinguished Recent Contribution of Social Work Education Award by the Council of Social Work Education, the International Roda Sarnat Award of the National Association of Social Workers, the Best Article in Social Indicators Research Award, and in January 2014, Dr. Estes was inducted in the American Academy of Social Work and Social Welfare, the leading professional honorific organization for social welfare specialists in the United States. Also, he was honored by ISQOLS Research Award, and in the same year, the International Consortium for Social Development honored him in Singapore for the pioneering work in the international and comparative social development research. Thank you very much, Richard, for coming. The most important thing for Richard is who is Richard as a person, as a social worker. Please come.
Welcome, my friends. If one lives long enough, you accomplish many things. And sometimes, if we're academics, we achieve a lot of intellectual things. I want to first thank Graciela for the energy and the imagination that she's put into organizing this first regional conference for Latin America. To my knowledge, Jill may correct me, it's only the second regional conference we've had. The first one was on Africa, and perhaps next time in Asia. But these are very important for people of the region to come together and to share ideas that are different from the global conference. I just want to make a few comments based on my review of the program that Graciela and all of you have put together for this conference, however. And I just want to talk about Latin America. Graciela asked me to talk a little bit about ISQOLS and its founding, but another time. Okay. This time, just talk a little bit about the Latin American region. The population of the region is 660 million, which is quite a sizable region given the tremendous space that it occupies. The two largest countries being Brazil and Mexico, and Argentina, I think, is a little less than 50, maybe 47 million people. It consists of 20 countries divided into 3 sub-regions. North America, which includes Mexico, Central America, of course, and South America. The term Latin America came into use in 1865 in Paris, when it was decided by the colonial powers to think of the whole region as a unified region rather than as separate sub-regions and so on. One of the things that strikes one about Latin America as a region is the tremendous cultural diversity that exists here. In terms of people of European origin, the mestizo population, which is a mixture, the European population continues to be here in large numbers, and we've seen it through much of the architecture some of which you will be able to see tonight, I think, through the artwork. But this tremendous diversity of cultures and mixture, getting along together in peace now, is really quite an accomplishment for the region. 90% of the population is Christian, 82% Catholic. That's remarkable. Europe is primarily Protestant. The United States and Canada are primarily Protestant. But together, having such a homogeneous religious background makes possible a lot of things that other societies cannot achieve. Latin America also has, and this is going through your program now, the various papers that we're going to be listening to, the history of colonialism. Many of your papers will focus on the history of colonialism and then the legacy of colonialism. But many of our topics, appropriately so, are post-colonial, modern topics dealing with modern development, post-independence of countries within the region. The contemporary characteristics of the region are the very rapid urbanization of the population, which I'm not altogether clear is necessarily a good thing for it to take place so fast, because it leads to very high population density. Mariano can talk about in terms of Mexico City. How many people live in Mexico City?
25, if you take 25 million.
During the day, 25 million. During the day. At night. At night. During the day, maybe closer to 30, 35 million people. All convening together at the same time, which leads to a lot of congestion, pollution, and difficulties just in terms of management. Fortunately, Buenos Aires has been spared a lot of that, though it still feels very congested, but that has to do more with the structure of the roadbeds. They're relatively narrow based on the old colonial horse and buggy days, I think, and now we have cars to fill those spaces. So rapid urbanization. One of the issues that came up in a couple of the papers that intrigued me very much were the joint problems of decline of fertility. Latin American families are having fewer children, sometimes countries with fewer than one child per family, one statistically average, combined with rapid aging, which leads to a very high age dependency ratio. It's a case that now in the region that for every 100 economically active persons, those in the workforce, there are 52 who are dependent on that 100 for their support, the elderly, children, persons with disabilities, and so on. So, and that number is going, age dependency that number is going to increase in a negative direction as the society goes on. This is a very important implication for us in quality of life research. There is, as Graciela pointed out, still a very serious divide between those who are economically well off and those who are struggling to meet their basic needs. As in most societies in the world, you have a very well off upper class of people. In Latin America's case, it's only about 10% of the population that has almost 80% of the total wealth of the country. And of course, to equalize that will take a long time to achieve. My country is going in the opposite direction. We have more and more concentration of wealth among just 5%. Maybe 5 people. I don't even know if it's 5% anymore. GDP in Latin America is $14 trillion, which is an enormous amount of productivity. And half of that is exports. And per capita income level ranges from 10,000 US dollars to about 22,000 US dollars, which is a very substantial level of income compared with Asia and African states. Economic factors influence, I should say factors that are influencing Latin American development from my perspective in terms of doing global research are the economic factors: production, distribution, and consumption. And we can get into a whole long discussion about each element of the economic process on that. And some of the papers will get into to that. Access to health care, which you appropriately mentioned, which is very difficult to achieve in many countries, both because of cost and then the issue of quality. Getting into the front door of a clinic does not necessarily mean you have high quality health care. We're very fortunate in Argentina. We've got very good health care, so far as I can see, throughout the country. The second issue is, third issue is education, access to education, which has been phenomenal. The enrollment in primary school education is rapidly becoming universal throughout the Latin American region. Secondary school, about 70%, tertiary school, about 20%. Interestingly, as in European countries and in the US and Canada, the majority of university students are now women. 60% of all university students in Latin America are women. This is going to make for a big challenge in terms of family and family life in the future as women adopt careers as their primary choice. Many great changes about that in terms of traditional norms. Safety and security, you have mentioned several times in your presentation, is another one of those major issues that will affect quality of life in Latin America, which has gone through so many revolutions and so much suffering, including in this country. We were walking along a boulevard last night, and of course could not miss the plaques dedicated to memory of the disappeared in Argentina, which is just yesterday. And many of the mothers and the grandmothers of those disappeared still are living today. And you feel it in the memorials that exist throughout the city. So safety, security, violence, and the history, post-colonial history, with the new governments and the conflicts that came about with those is very important. A very positive change has been the increase in social security or social welfare infrastructure, including things like access to healthcare, access to education, opportunities for women to advance, even something like transportation, which I believe you mentioned also, is very important elements of the social infrastructure that's taken place. And of course, very special for a country like Argentina, well, actually for the whole region, are the cultural pieces. And there will be many presentations made at the conference on the innovations that have taken place in bringing indigenous culture back into present day reality. The European part, the colonial part, fine. But there's a tradition, a history that predated all of that. And there are a number of papers that are talking about the return to traditional values, norms, practices, celebrations, and so on, that make people feel more centered in terms of their own cultural traditions. The economic issues, I'll just mention some of which I've listed. I've got details about each of them, but I just want to mention them. First is increased security and confidence. Now that inflation, even in Argentina, has come somewhat under control, as opposed to the very high rates of inflation in some parts of the world exceeding 50%, 60% each year. Sometimes in some countries, they want you to pay for your dinner before you've even eaten your dinner, because by the time you finish your dinner, the value of the currency is already changed. They immediately go to the bank and so on. I don't think that was the situation here or will ever be in the future, but it's a very real situation to be concerned with. Access to education through the availability of financial resources, empowerment through the availability of resources is extremely important. Trust in government is increasingly the case in Latin America. This is not the case at the moment in my country. There's a very low level of confidence in government given the let's just say, unusual things that are going on at the moment. The opportunities to dialogue, and the last third of your presentation, I was really struck by that, the opportunity for horizontal dialogue between and among people. That becomes possible through the economic advances that have taken place, because there's a degree of comfort and security that money does bring to the situation. The reduced polarization in terms of conflict between ethnically different groups, the promotion of civil society, particularly the emergence of a very viable non-governmental organization sector, the NGOs, private philanthropy, and volunteering, which are all three of which are very important parts of community life, civic engagement in society today, in Latin American society today. Some of the cultural achievements that will be discussed in various workshops and panels will be those related to the cultural changes that are and will continue to take place throughout the region. One is the achievement of social cohesion as opposed to conflict between and among people and groups and between actually countries within the region. There's always a tradition of intra-regional rivalry and competition. This group, this nation versus that nation, and so on. And the need for one to be superior over the other. I don't hear as much of that as I have in past visits to Latin America. Identity and heritage, which is where you were coming from when you referred to the earlier Maslowian hierarchy of needs. People feel more secure about their identity and their heritage. Art and expression, some of which we will have the advantage to see tonight at the museum. But also there are a number of papers talking about the use of art as a way of expression that's unique to the Latin American region. Tradition and values, the re-emergence of festivals and celebrations that were long ago forgotten but are now being restored. Education and access to knowledge on the part of much larger groups of people in greater numbers. Healthcare practices, and finally, and most importantly, culinary traditions. Argentina, if nothing else, is great for food. You will not go hungry in Argentina. And unfortunately, I did not find a single paper on that, so I added it as a last note because that was my footnote to read the papers. So there's just my thoughts about as a keynote, as we're opening the Congress, as things that we expect to be able to discuss at least and learn from various people within the region.
Thank you.
And Gracia, thank you so much for those two generous comments. That was totally unnecessary. Very kind of you.